Back at Bathurst and Sheppard this Sunday, something felt different. 2 weeks into Toronto Police's new rules at this high-profile intersection, a flashpoint of the Israel-Gaza conflict playing out in one of Canada's largest Jewish neighborhoods. There were maybe 20 police cruisers, plus command vans, and the Mobile Intelligence Unit, dozens of officers, on foot, on bikes, even on horseback, tracking every movement. The police far outnumbered the protesters. And the new no-go zones, the residential side streets, when the anti-Israel protesters started to move, I didn't see anyone breaking the rules. Instead, they changed tactics. No longer one large group, they split up. Smaller clusters, moving differently, taking different routes. I didn't see any arrests either. I spent 4 hours at the intersection, and what I found is this. While the police rules have changed, the frustration among residents hasn't.
I get to see them screaming with their megaphones into the faces of elderly people just trying to get to the drugstore or the grocery store. And I find it outrageous that they're allowed to do this in a residential neighborhood.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Monday, April 6th, 2026. Welcome to North Star, the flagship news podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granofsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. That frustration has been building here for more than 2 years, but this week did look different. The crowd was smaller. Their movement had changed. Last week, protesters marched west along Sheppard as a single group, flags, megaphones, chanting as they walked past synagogues, a Jewish school, and a seniors' residence. And they ran into police and barricades whenever they tried to turn onto the side streets. This time, they split up. 6 headed south down Bathurst towards Earl Bales Park, home to Toronto's Holocaust Memorial. Others moved west in pairs or small groups along Sheppard. There were between 60 and 80 police on hand to follow them closely, and residents were still trying to figure out what exactly the new rules had improved. Sherry Gallowitz is a graphic artist, a fundraiser, and an author who lives 5 minutes west of the intersection. She was so upset about what happened last weekend, she came early to speak directly to police.
I didn't want to be here later when whatever's going to happen is going to happen because I have a lot of anxiety and it's going to stress me out. So I just stopped on my way back from walking my dog at Earl Bales Park right over there to ask the police officers, of which there are many, if they're going to allow these protesters that are going to gather soon at this corner to march down towards where I live at Wilmington and Sheppard like they did last Sunday, because I had understood the week prior, I saw a video that they were going to require them to disperse after the rally and not go into the residential streets. So I just got my explanation that that's correct. And they don't consider Bathurst Sheppard being a main thoroughfare as being the residential street. So they are allowed to keep doing what they're doing, and that now to start marching up and down Sheppard at will, and that's an escalation. Whereas they were restricted to, or they were staying at this intersection for 2 years, I think it is now. And now they're apparently going to be marching up and down Sheppard Avenue through a Jewish neighborhood, past Jewish schools, a synagogue, lots of Jewish people living around here. And, we're still a minority, but I'm sure the other people don't love it either.
So when you found this out, that we got it wrong? Because I understood the same thing, that they were just going to allow them here.
I spoke to the command officer over there who said, he's the one I saw on video saying that they were not allowed to, 2 weeks ago, to walk through the residential streets. He said, yes, I did say that, and Sheppard is not considered a residential street. It's a main thoroughfare. They're allowed. They got their charter rights, etc.
But these people. You've been seeing them for 2.5 years. How does that sit with you?
It's outrageous, and I also get very upset that people, for all this time, you're here, that's great, but it hasn't been very reported on, certainly not by, there haven't been TV crews here. I haven't seen CTV or CBC here, ever.
Sometimes, depends.
Well, maybe when I wasn't here. I've seen video of things that have happened at this corner on international media with people in Australia, in Europe, commenting on what the heck is going on in Canada, about this intersection. And it's just been a side note for all these months, years.
But how does it impact your life? It's not a side note.
It impacts my life because I drive by here every Sunday, literally from where I live, to walk my dog in the park behind me. And I don't usually stop, but I get to see it. I get to see them screaming with their megaphones into the faces of elderly people just trying to get to the drugstore or the grocery store. And I find it outrageous that they're allowed to do this in a residential neighborhood. If they were downtown in front of a consulate or, in a public setting, a city hall, somewhere designated for demonstrations, I don't see why it's a charter right to be able to walk through a residential neighborhood. There is no target here other than the people that live here.
So when the policeman on the news a couple of weeks ago said we're going to change the way they're allowed, are you saying that they lied to the community, or because
I believe that what he said, what they meant was residential streets. Well, they won't allow them, I guess, to walk up Wilmington, but if they're trailing them, which I think he said they were and will be, they have marched up Wilmington, which is even closer to my house. And at one point about a year ago, marched back and forth behind Beth Emmet Synagogue, which is in the middle of this residential neighborhood. So I don't think they're going to allow them to do that type of thing. But on Sheppard, they're apparently allowed. And what I heard is that's what they meant, and people misunderstood.
I heard what you heard, and I was like, good, that's
residential streets. I even said, along the residential main thoroughfares, there's buildings, there's apartment buildings and condos and rental buildings popping up all along Sheppard, like one after the other. There's some under construction right now between Bathurst and the Allen. And these are all people that live in the neighborhood. I don't understand. It seems discriminatory to me to consider people that own houses, which are for the most part, not on the main thoroughfares, as residents of a residential neighborhood, and renters and people with living in apartment buildings and condos along these main streets, which is all of Toronto is like this, as not being residents in a residential neighborhood. I was renting for many, many years till I finally was able to buy a house. I was always fuming during all those years at being referred to as not being referred to as homeowners and taxpayers.
Okay, give me one word to how you're feeling now that you heard this today before we go.
Frustrated. Very frustrated. And angry and upset and fed up. That's a lot of words.
That's good words. I appreciate it. Coming up, what prompted police to bring in the new rules? Sunday's protest rally took place just 3 days after Toronto police announced a major development. Their hate crime team raided several Toronto area addresses, including a self-storage unit, where they found anti-Semitic signs that were carried by anti-Israel protesters on March 15th at this very intersection. They also found cell phones and laptops, and they say there are other suspects and persons of interest in an ongoing investigation. Police charged 33-year-old Mohammed Anas Seal with public incitement of hatred. He appeared in court Thursday. He's been released on bail. The accused is well known on the protest circuit since October 7th. He's one of the leaders of Action for Palestine. He's been arrested and charged once before for allegedly assaulting a police officer at this intersection in December 2024, but the charges were dropped. He also made international headlines when Toronto police were photographed handing over Tim Hortons coffee to a suspect and his group occupying a highway overpass. Police say this hate crime arrest, combined with the shocking gunfire targeting 3 synagogues and several Jewish-owned businesses during the first week of March, and the U.S. consulate, represents what they called, quote, an escalation in behavior that became a clear risk to public safety. Hence, the new protest rules. Inspector Israel Bernardo is the senior officer in charge of the site. He acknowledges that his announcement may have been misunderstood by some members of the Jewish community who thought it meant the end of the protests here altogether.
The plan is to ensure community safety, as we discussed. And also, there's also a right to protest, which under the charter that people have, but it has to be reasonable, and we're not going to allow them to protest in residential areas. So the confusion, I think some people had that they couldn't come back. That's not the case. It was pretty clear that Bathurst Sheppard is a main thoroughway. There's public transit, multiple lanes, and there's a lot of community safety issues, and it's not reasonable to incite hatred and spew hateful things in neighborhoods and instill more fear that's already there. Based on, we just had another shooting a few days ago, so the community is alarmed and scared. So we want to make sure that the community feels safe, but balancing that with the rights of people to protest in a free democratic society.
You said the confusion, and I think that's fair. I'm confused. I thought that they weren't going to be allowed, and they were allowed. Can you sort of walk me through how that went?
I think people took the headlines of not coming back, and then later on in the story, they didn't read where it was the residential streets. I recognize there are condominiums here that people do live, but these little small homes, this is a main thoroughfare. People use it, and it'd be difficult to put limitations on Bathurst when the bus goes all the way up, and Sheppard. It's a long street, so it's just we're comfortable in this position, and I think it really supports the community at whole. Be it if it was a Muslim community, a Jewish community. I think your home is your sanctuary, and you should be protected from that type of behavior and that type of fear that it instills.
You're right. There is, especially since this force ramped up over the Passover holidays, right? With like SWAT units, and I don't know what they're called, but
that SWAT unit, to speak to that already happens in the U.S. I just think we have to be prepared, and it was a great idea by command, because if something were to happen, you want a mobile team. So it's having that militarized look. People get scared, but just think of something were to happen active, and we had to really scramble to get people there when you have a team strategically placed, trained, and are ready with all the intelligence to be where they need to be. And I think it just supplements what we already have in place with all the checks we're already doing and our ETF, that type of thing. So it's just unfortunately, it's a realistic approach we need to take to ensure community safety and a quick response.
So if they start moving along Bathurst, up Bathurst along Sheppard, these cruisers will deploy to those side streets?
So today we have a great complement of bicycle officers. Bicycle are the best. They're going to parallel them and ensure to give them the direction that they can't go down the residential streets for the protest.
But what about in front of the synagogue and then seniors' residence, Kensington and Darche and all those places?
So there's something called the bylaw, the bubble bylaw, but that specifically says targeting the institution, impeding, harassing. So if they're walking by quietly and keep walking, that's not something that we see right now that's infringing on the bubble bylaw. It is a bylaw. It's not a federal offense, a provincial offense. There's different tiers of offenses. It does have use and teeth, but ultimately, if the purpose is not to target that location, we'd have to believe that they're targeting that location. Yeah. So if you actually look at the bylaw itself, that's how it reads.
And are you looking for anything specific today regarding the incitement to hatred or willful promotion because of the arrest of Anas, I don't know how to say his name.
It's also on both sides. So it's not like it's anyone that shows up inciting. There's religious items and clothing that can be insulting if used improperly to, say, a Muslim person. So we're going to be we have our intelligence officers here as well, and anything we see that's brought to our attention that may be of concern, that's inciting any hatred to the crowd, we're going to be dealing with it right away. Some of these charges, there's some offenses we can deal with at the time, but there's the majority of them we have to put before the Ministry of Attorney General because they wanted protection when they came out with these hate laws to ensure it wasn't abused. Right. And now I don't think they were designed for these type of things. It was for different issues, but now it's kind of holding us back, for lack of a better term, to making some decisions because we know we can't lay those charges. But it was in the spirit of the charter and protection, ensuring that people weren't just arrested for saying anything. Right? So that's where we are today. So we're working within the framework of the law, knowing that the landscape has changed and knowing that there's a serious community impact right now. We're at a time where I can't remember a time where it's been like this, where there's been a fear of community safety and people are really scared.
As the clock ticked towards the start of the rally at 11 a.m., here's what I saw. On the anti-Israel side, there were about 20 protesters. Many wore masks. Many carried Palestinian flags or held printed signs attacking Israel. One sign accused the IDF of killing 20,000 babies. And some people carried other flags. One was from the current Iranian Islamic regime, which is now under attack by the Americans and Israel for more than 5 weeks. On the opposite side of the intersection, the pro-Israel side, 25 pro-Israel supporters. They played Israeli music. There was dancing. They carried Israeli and Canadian flags. It wasn't long before they were joined by pro-democracy activists from Iran who called out, Am Yisrael Chai, thank you, Israel, and bring back the Shah. And both sides exchanged slogans. All Zionists are racist, or Where's Zionists? Michael Tepper didn't expect to see the suspect show up at this week's protest, not after it was he who launched his own formal complaint that Tepper thinks helped Toronto police with their hate crime investigation into the anti-Semitic posters on display here last month. Tepper is president of the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation and tracks all the hate-related charges connected to the thousands of anti-Israel protests in the city since October 7th. He came to Bathurst and Sheppard again Sunday to check for further violations to report.
The police announced just before Second Seder that they had arrested and charged, I can't pronounce his name, but you know better.
Mohammed Anas Sial. On March 15th, he appeared at the northeast corner of Bathurst and Sheppard carrying a sign that depicted a creature with Jewish facial features, a kippah and pious long side curls, and the body was the body of an insect with spider-like limbs, and it was dehumanizing to Jewish people.
It had a horrible hook nose and everything.
That is correct. It was reminiscent of the caricatures that would appear in Nazi propaganda in the 1930s.
What was your involvement with the actual complaints and arrest about that weekend?
These images were brought to my attention from the Twitter account operated by Leviathan, and I called the Toronto Police non-emergency line later that evening, and constables appeared at my house around 1 in the morning on Monday the 16th, and I showed them the pictures and the files, and they took my statement, and that incident number that they assigned to my case is the same incident number that they used for the arrest and the publicity.
Wow, so the 4 something, whatever, yeah, I saw it. I'm surprised because so many Jewish organizations, B'nai B'rith and also Wiesenthal, everybody was outraged that they hadn't done anything, but that they had arrested people at the Al-Quds parade for protesting, against the Ayatollahs. So now that the arrest was made, it was like, 3 weeks later. Are you satisfied? Are you happy with the speed?
No, I'm certainly not happy with the speed. Mohammed Sial is known to police. He was previously arrested for assaulting a police officer, and those charges were withdrawn. So the police knew exactly what he looks like. They know where he lives. It's in the public record, in fact. And so I'm astonished that it took 3 weeks for them to act on this information that was obvious, and they could have picked him up within 24 hours.
Well, but there's this whole thing usually about the Attorney General having to sign off when it's willful promotion of hatred. It says Section 3.
Not in this case, because he was charged with 319 sub 1, which is public incitement of hatred, and that charge does not require the Attorney General's consent.
Oh, okay, my mistake. All right.
So it's 319 sub 2 that requires the Attorney General's consent, and he still could be charged with that as well. My opinion is that he well deserves that charge, and I'm surprised that the Attorney General needs so much time to make a determination from such obvious and overwhelming evidence, but that's not in the police's hands. But I'm still surprised that the police took 3 weeks to make that arrest, even for 319 sub 1.
Now, his lawyer, Shane Martinez, from the December assaulting a police officer, got him off. They withdrew the charges. What do you hope this new arrest sends any message, if any message at all, should be sent?
I think the message to be sent is that the Jewish community is on the watch. We are not letting anything go. We're not giving any grace And we are going to insist on rigorous enforcement of the law, and we're going to insist that the Crown proceed with these cases with seriousness and alacrity.
Yes, we did a whole podcast with you about, 3 weeks ago, where a lot of the 40% of the charges are being withdrawn. So we'll see what happens. And meanwhile, you're here today. Have you ever seen such a large, there was like 50 police officers here and there's more deployed. It seems like a lot for a protest.
Yes, there are a lot, because the intention of the protesters in coming here is to harass and intimidate the Jewish community and to demonstrate dominance over them. That's what they want to do. There are over 150 street corners of major intersections in Toronto. They always come here. It's not because they want to convince the public of the righteousness of their message. They're not going to Steeles and McCowan. They're not going to Victoria Park in St. Clair. They're always coming here to Bathurst and Sheppard because they know, and we know, that this is the geographic heart of the Jewish community in Toronto, and that's why they're here, to harass and intimidate us. And that the message that we need to send is that's not going to happen anymore.
When City Councillor James Pasternak arrived to check out the protest in his ward and speak to the inspector in command, he noted the large police presence, which Pasternak welcomed as a bit of progress, but overall feels the whole massive deployment is a waste of resources for such a few protesters.
Well, you know what? We are fed up with this. It seems to me that a lot of times the mobs have the charter rights. But what about the local community? What about their rights to be free of harassment, incitement, and demonization? They have rights too, and we have to protect their rights. Why are thousands of residents being held hostage by 20 protesters? Something is really wrong with this picture. It's a broken judicial system. We need law enforcement, and we need political will to end this.
They had at least 50 police officers when I was here this morning. So
Look, police,
isn't that better than what it was before?
Yeah, police are doing their best. But most people would like police to go back to traditional law enforcement, to respond to break and enters, stolen vehicles, assaults, stabbings, shootings, those terrible crimes that we have a police force for. This is a glorified babysitting service. And we can't tie up resources like this every Sunday. We want everyone to go home.
The police announced maybe a week and a half ago that they were going to have a different sort of regime for this corner, that they weren't going to allow people to go into residential streets. So then they allowed them to march along Sheppard. How did that sit with you last week and today?
Well, I think there was some progress in the sense that they did not walk into the neighborhood streets and they blocked them. The protesters were going into those streets and harassing local residents. So that was stopped. The problem is last week they walked along Sheppard Avenue, but that's also a neighborhood. There's Jewish businesses. There were 2 synagogues. There's a Jewish school. That's a neighborhood too. And they're going along there to intimidate people. And it's wrong.
The police inspector said it was a misunderstanding of the new rules. I didn't understand it the way he said it, but he said, we never said we weren't allowing them to go. Sheppard is not a residential street. That's what he said.
Well, of course Sheppard is a residential street. It's not single-family detached. But, there are mid-rises. There are low-rises. There are businesses. There are Jewish businesses. There's synagogues. There's a Jewish school. It is a neighborhood. It's part of a neighborhood.
They arrested and charged one of the main ringleaders, Mohammed Anas, with a hate crime on Erev Pesach. Second night.
I thank police for laying those charges. I thank the Ministry of the Attorney General for approving them. Those were disgraceful signs, posters, right out of 1930s Nazi Germany. And if we are to be a city of high purpose, we must lay charges like that. I'm glad they caught him. I'm glad charges are laid. And I'm asking the Ministry of the Attorney General not to drop the charges.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounded like for this episode of North Star, brought to you by the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. What do you think of the Toronto Police's new protest rules for Bathurst and Sheppard? Write to us at info@thecjn.ca with your take. And you can read more about the protests at the articles in our show notes links. North Star was produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman and Andrea Varsany, with Michael Freeman as the executive producer, Alicia Richler as editorial director, and Yael Scher as graphic designer. Brett Higgins composed the theme. And thank you for listening.